Hello and welcome once again to a brand new episode of The Bike Show, and this week we're going to be casting a critical eye over the latest developments in the world of motorcycling, and we're going to catch up with what's happening with MV Agusta in South Africa. First though, I'd like to discuss something that I'm sure afflicts us all from time to time. Doubt. It's a terrible feeling, so destructive and often completely pointless when it comes to stuff that's already happened, things that can't be changed even if you wanted to. Professional doubt is even more terrible. I'm sure most of you will have experienced something similar, worried that you've done something wrong at work or at least could have done something better. Maybe you've got the sort of job where nobody will ever notice if you've perhaps made a bit of a mess of things, and I wish I could say the same. You see, I know my job isn't, at the end of the day, important in any way at all. Yeah, I may, if you trust my judgment, sway your ideas about what your next bike purchase might be, but that's it. It's just a swaying kind of influence, because I'm pretty sure our audience, you lot, are ripe with intelligence, and you'll research your next bike via a load of different opinions from an assortment of journalists and influencers and vloggers and friends and your own gut feelings, but still, I do take my job at least a little bit seriously. I've been doing it for very nearly 30 years now, and I like to think that when you take in one of my reviews, you're getting the opinion of a motorcycle journalist with a lot of experience. And you can rely on my opinion, even if you don't necessarily agree with it. Bikes can be a hugely subjective and highly contentious arena for differing opinions, despite the massive array of black and white numbers with which we can describe these pieces of machinery. They may be quantifiable in terms of so many aspects of their performance, but what makes them so magical are the emotions and feelings they provoke in each and every one of us, and those are quite often very different for each one of us too. But ultimately, some bikes are good and some bikes are slightly less good, and some are even brilliant. But as a trying to occasionally be professional journalist, I like to be absolutely positive before I bless a bike with such accolades. And I did exactly that when I rode BMW's R NineT earlier this year in Spain. I can't pretend otherwise. I unashamedly fell in love with the thing, and then I saw the many YouTube comments, and I noticed that there was, along with a lot of agreement, also a lot of serious disagreement. How dare I? What was I thinking? Did I even know how to ride? Have I ever ridden X, Y or Z before? Because if I had, I would surely know better. Well, I have ridden X, Y and Z, and I genuinely thought the 9T was brilliant, but the doubt began to seep in. Had I gone overboard? It was the first bike I'd ridden after a couple of months of a winter layoff, so was I just a bit giddy with the excitement of being back on a bike? The mountain roads to the southwest of Madrid were flat out stunning. Had they clouded my judgment? I began to wonder whether I was misleading you, recommending a very expensive retro naked bike as class leading when it might actually be just sort of ordinary. And now I've been presented with another riding opportunity because I'm travelling through Bavaria, so I've simply had to revisit the bike, but rather than repeat exactly the same exercise, I thought that instead of the top of the range R NineT with all the fancy 719 options like I had in Spain, I'd go for the most basic model I could get my hands on. And that would be this, the R NineT Pure, that in this instance comes with some extras that I definitely would have, including the Pro riding modes, and some that I definitely wouldn't, like the Garmin sat-nav that's there to help foreign journalists like me to stay unlost. Personally, I prefer to listen to Google's voice commands for my directions and not have the distraction of a screen that, truth be told, I can't really see clearly without reading glasses anyway. There are subtle differences in the chassis that mean this isn't a direct copy of the experience I had on my Spanish trip, but it's very close. So I will soon know if the doubt that has been gnawing away at me for the past several months was wasted energy or not. I really am an idiot. No, not the sort of idiot who got the original verdict wrong. I'm the kind of idiot who's wasted far too much time worrying and doubting himself about having an ability to tell when a bike really is good. It took me literally 2 or 3 minutes from picking this bike up from BMW HQ in Munich to realise it really is a special kind of machine. The same mid-range maestro of a motor that I originally felt in Spain. The delicious soundtrack, the mood music that's provided by the crackling and popping of the exhaust when you downchange or roll off the throttle. This bike is just simple, good fun. If you find yourself on one of these on a twisty road and you don't end up grinning like the village idiot with a belly full of beer, then there's something very wrong with you.
If the riding pleasure to be had is indisputable, then the looks, judging by all those YouTube comments, certainly aren't. I still maintain it cuts an attractive, minimalist type of shape, but some of you just can't seem to get past the protruding cylinder heads that come with the boxer engine territory. If that's the case, then this bike obviously isn't for you. But I'm in the camp that likes the unique look of this engine and thinks it adds some character to what otherwise could very easily be just another largely anonymous bike. In terms of performance, it is in exactly the same state of tune as it is in the model I rode in Spain. So you've got your 109 horsepower and that impressive 116 Newton meters of torque. On this Pure version, the most obvious cost-cutting measures compared to the more expensive 9T are the mag wheels, single exhaust end can and the loss of one of the double clocks. But the changes are more than skin deep because the Pure also has some minor differences in the chassis department. Fractions of a degree on the steering head angle and a couple of millimeters less caster give it a whole 6 millimeters of extra wheelbase. Tiny changes, but combined with the unadjustable 43mm fork, compared to the fully adjustable 46mm item on the 9T, the result is a barely discernible relaxation of the handling feel compared to its more expensive sibling. Purists, see what I did there? Might prefer the more authentic look of these forks and non-radial mounted brakes, so you can always say you went for the cheaper option, not out of a desire to save money, but for aesthetic reasons. Sometimes in this part of Bavaria that is so densely populated, despite looking like idyllic farmland, you have to really head off the main roads to find some traffic-free playgrounds. The result is some narrow, awkward sections of tar where you simply wouldn't be able to enjoy most bikes, especially anything that comes with big horsepower or a full-on sport bike chassis and riding position.
It's no problem at all for this Pure. Though to be fair, it's probably no problem at all either for anything in the R9T range, with the possible exception of the Racer with its slightly more committed riding position. On this Pure though, the experience is properly entertaining. The ridiculously wide bars let you elbow leverage it into whatever tight corners you come across, and the really low centre of gravity helps it not be a handful even at really slow speeds. And the stop-start nature of these tighter roads gives you a justifiable excuse to keep abusing this intoxicating mid-range and working the gearbox, which is completely manual, remember. No quick shifting shenanigans here. Simply you and your two hands to flip the throttle and flick the clutch. Old school riding charms to go with the old school riding looks, I suppose.
Which is all for show, obviously, since underneath the fake it till you make it old school charm are some pretty sophisticated electronics. As standard, the bike comes with 2 riding modes, Road and Rain, which softens the power delivery. Ticking the right options boxes will avail you of what I found on this bike with its dynamic riding mode that also makes the traction control back off a touch, and you get the heated grips and cruise control. The weather is good and the roads twisty during this test, so I don't try either of those latter two options, and the dynamic riding mode is so beautifully calibrated that I settled on this most aggressive of the throttle settings and just left it there, whether I was trying to scrape the pegs or giving my wife a lift to the shops. Other than that, you can have ABS Pro that gives you cornering ABS and dynamic engine brake control to help you get the most out of your banzai braking.
The Pure, which is a very attractive way of saying the base, is the cheapest of the R9Ts, but that doesn't mean that this bike is in fact particularly cheap. In its most basic form, with absolutely no extras, you'll still be looking at a smidgen under 14,000 euros, or about 230,000 rand or so, and that's not a small amount of money for a 109 horsepower naked bike. It is, though, a full 3,200 euros or 55,000 rand less than the 285,000 rand basic R9T. So if you're prepared to forego the uprated upside down forks, spoke wheels and the radial brake mountings and the rev counter and a few other bits and bobs, then you can actually save yourself a sizable wedge. Or you could look at it another way, and for the same money as a base R9T, you could get yourself the Pure and then spend like a drunken lottery winner on all the lovely 719 options that really take your fancy. Maybe the alley tank, maybe the spoke wheels, perhaps the fancy rear sets, and then you'd end up with a tricked out Pure with a bit of individuality and a load of scrumptious bling on it for the same price as the basic R9T. So as well as being affordable, the Pure is also billed as something of a blank canvas for you to be able to customize to suit your own specific needs, but most of us don't have the skills or pockets quite deep enough for that sort of creativity. But that's okay, because the Pure is a delightful retro naked bike just as it is. Buy it, do nothing to it other than fill it with fuel and wash it occasionally, and you'll have yourself a seriously entertaining bike that looks and sounds just as good as it goes. There's not much more you can ask of such a model, is there?